Sure. I was born in Iran in a time where Iran was at war with Iraq. So one of my first childhood memories is actually bombs dropping in our neighborhood. And yeah, it was uh, traumatic to say the least. My father actually, we had the military break into our home and rip him out of my arms and throw him in prison. And over there, what happens is if you go to prison, you really don't know if they're coming back out or if you'll ever see them again. When we actually escaped the country, I was close to 7 or 8 years old. So when I first came to the States, the first things that I experienced was, wow, you can actually go to bed at night and know that you're going to be okay. Like nothing's going to happen. You're not going to have bombs drop on you. You're not going to have the military break down your door or things like that are just it's not going to happen.
Beersheba and I have been together for 11, going on 11 years now, and it's been a quite a journey, quite a journey. When Beersheba met me, I was homeless. I was $20 million in debt.
Hmm.
I was alone, and I was in horrible physical condition. I came out of prison in horrible physical condition. I lost 40 pounds I didn't need to lose. I had horrendous periodontal disease, and I was $20 million in debt, which is sizable to say the least. And so, here again, if I may just emphasize, the only thing that has true and lasting value is that which is eternal, that which can never be lost or taken, because just a few years earlier, I was worth no quote worth north of 20 million. That was my net worth, supposedly. And in a blink of an eye, I was now $20 million in debt. So that's how quickly and transitory things in the physical world are. The first thing she did was she believed in me. I'm not sure why, because I wasn't evidencing a lot of believable behaviors at the time. I wasn't quite sure I even believed in myself
Yeah.
anymore. I had been hammered so hard by the media. I can't tell you how many people, oh, I love you, you've changed my life, all these things. And then just like that, they flipped and they started,
Yeah.
oh, he's a money monger,
Satan.
and he's Satan, and he's all these different things. The same people. And so they jumped on the bandwagon. And
Yeah.
and that was one of the great lessons, because here's a young lady who did know me, and she knew me with all of my flaws and all of my brokenness,
Hmm.
and she cared. I was broken. I was in mental anguish, and I was mad at life, and mad at the system, and mad at
Hmm.
God, and just really not in a good place. And yet my speculation, part of what allowed her to see beyond that, was her previous experience, was the things she'd been through, the
Hmm.
hell she'd been through as well. And she saw beyond the hell that I was in to something greater.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about resilience and redemption. I'm delighted to welcome James and Bear Ray. James is a New York Times bestselling author, philosopher, and consultant who has appeared on Oprah, Larry King, and The Today Show. Bear is an intuitive consultant who helps people heal from their past and take their power back. And I'll include links to connect with them in the show notes. Welcome, James. Welcome, Bear. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you for having us, Linda.
I am looking forward to this conversation, and I hope that what we say today is able to help a lot of people.
Hmm.
And both of you have gone through hard things. And so as we talk about these stories today, we want to share that hope that as we go through hard things, that there's something good in the end. Bear, is it okay if we start with your story?
Sure. Sure. I was born in Iran in a time where Iran was at war with Iraq. So one of my first childhood memories is actually bombs dropping in our neighborhood. And yeah, it was uh, traumatic to say the least. We lived in Iran at a time where the so-called revolution happened and the Islamic Republic came and took over the country. And a lot of uh I'll just say it was the Jewish people, the Baha'i people, and the Christian people were they were tortured the most. My
Persecuted.
Persecuted, yeah. My father actually, we had the military break into our home and rip him out of my arms and throw him in prison. And over there, what happens is if you go to prison, you really don't know if they're coming back out or if you'll ever see them again. And luckily enough, he did make it out. And we, as a family, escape the country. We had to find someone that would smuggle us across the desert in the dead of night. And at the risk of being caught, if we would have gotten caught, we for sure would have been killed. And luckily enough, we made it and we had to stay in Pakistan for a couple of years to get our residency or legal papers and become an alien to be able to come to the US, to the United States. And coming here and starting from scratch, I think a lot of immigrants that came to the States legally to start over, they can all relate that it's a hard life to start from. You got, especially for my parents being in their 40s with 3 kids and having to start over, not speaking the language, and there's a lot of things that followed after that. Well, and it ended up us two together. So
Many, many years later.
many
And
years later.
So
I
that's
hope we will get to that part as well. Yes, I'm sorry, James.
I was just gonna say there's the hope part.
Yeah.
Linda.
There's the
So
hope part that things get better. That what you have experienced, Bear, is so traumatic and it is so big. And the feeling of being so completely out of control, where your parents are torn from you. How old were you when that took place?
Well, the first time it happened, because it happened a couple times. The first time it happened, I believe I was about 3 years old. The second time it happened, I was 5 or 6. When we actually escaped the country, I was close to 7 or 8 years old. And that's, it's, yeah, I can't explain. It's a very different experience having, because I remember when I first, let me put it this way, when I first came to the States, the first things that I experienced was, wow, you can actually go to bed at night and know that you're going to be okay. Like nothing's going to happen. You're not going to have bombs drop on you. You're not going to have the military break down your door, or things like that are just, it's not going to happen. And that, for me to be here and to experience, to be living in America and being American, I'm super grateful for, because I know when we don't have the liberties and freedom, what it feels like and how it is.
And that is so huge. We have right now, unfortunately, many people who have had these privileges from birth and
Mhm.
don't even recognize that they are privileges. They and don't appreciate them. So you come from a perspective where you really truly understand how things could be otherwise.
Mhm.
And from my notes, I know that just coming to America in and of itself was not the end of the hardship. And you talk about gangs and experience with drugs and abusive relationships. Are there any of those you want to bring about or talk
Sure.
about, or is that enough?
No, I can go into that briefly, because when we came to the States, you can imagine it was very you're already distorted, and you don't, because being where we were from and experience the things that I've experienced, when you come here you don't really have anything in common with anyone to begin with. And you don't speak the same language. And both my parents had to work from like 6 in the morning till 10 at night just to make ends meet. So me and my older brother were pretty much watching the house and taking care of each other. And because of that, no parental guidance and the TV raising us, I got into, yeah, I hung out with the wrong crowds. I got in gang behavior. I started smoking at a young age and got into drugs and just did not make the right choices. And um fast forward a little bit, I cleaned up somewhat and got married in a horrible uh first marriage, which turned out to be an abusive marriage because I was following the mold of, yes, you should marry within your culture and within the same, background and this and that, and that didn't turn out so well. And and these things, because what happens to us is when we experience these traumas at a young age, we don't have the resources to be able to deal with them. So what we do is we end up making bad choices. For example, either smoking or doing drugs or drinking or anything like that. And what we don't realize is that those are an effect of a cause that we couldn't deal with long ago, but now we have this effect. So once I realized, I got to an age in my older years that, these are the effects of all the traumas that I've experienced in my life. Let me take a look at, what happened and because those traumas make you make choices and things you do throughout your life and the behaviors that you have
To cope.
to be able to
Just to
cope.
cope.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
to be able to feel okay. So I started looking into those, and little by little, doing the cleanup work and the healing work, I was able to put aside, the drugs and the smoking and all that. So I mean, I could go on, but I'll stop there because I think that's a lot.
Do you know, I appreciate so much that you got into the healing aspect of it, because that is the direction that we really want to take this when we're all said and done, is that we go through hard things. And from what I'm hearing from you, you have experienced war and privation and abuse and relationships and language issues and all of these things, being raised pretty much by the TV. And even with all of that, you're able to be heal and to be okay.
Yeah.
And it takes a while and it takes a process, but it is possible. And so I hope that the people who are listening today, I mean, I doubt there's going to be anyone who has the exact same set of circumstances that you have. And yet they think, oh my gosh, Bear was able to come back and be okay from that.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe I can heal too.
Mm.
And as we talk about our different experiences, Ray, let's talk about you and let you share a little bit. You've come from a very, very different set of circumstances where for a while you were on top of the world with your New York Times best-selling book. You had so many things going for you. And then a tragedy took place and it changed everything. Would you like to share what you have gone through?
Yes, I certainly I'll do my best to condense it because it's Beersheba and I have been together for 11 going on 11 years now, and it's been a quite a journey, quite a journey. And in 2009 I was at the top by worldly measures, and I want to make that specific declaration because one of the things that I think is vitally important for us to understand in today's world, and I became a product of it, is that we're conditioned that if you have a New York Times bestseller and you have a house in Beverly Hills, on Mulholland Drive, and you're worth over $20 million and you're on Oprah and on and on and on, that you're, quote, successful and you've made it. And what I realize, and when God or life took that away from me, and I say that intentionally, I had to step back and say, hey, wait a second, let me come back to center and let me realize what's really important. Because, and this is a really important message for today's world, in my opinion, we have gotten away from the sacred and way into the secular. And we have lost our principles and our values and our morals, and we see this all around us. And I realize in retrospect that when my life went through the tsunami that it went through, it took me a long time. There was a lot of pain and a lot of angst and a lot of healing that had to happen to get us to where we are now. It's been 13 years since that. And if your viewers are not familiar, I'll give the short story. My team and I were conducting a 5-day retreat in Sedona. It was a deep dive into the drivers of why we do what we do. And the drivers are internal, they're not external. And so what we were working on and with is what Bersaba has alluded to, these unresolved emotional issues that are completely out of our conscious awareness. And that's why it's so vitally important for all of us, if we want to heal, if we want to live a fulfilling life, we have to make the unconscious conscious. And that's work. You said it yourself. It takes work. It takes commitment. It's not an overnight sensation. And so we were doing this. And at the end of these 5-day experience, we had a experiential learning opportunity called a sweat lodge. And maybe some of your viewers are familiar because it was all over the media. The media literally crucified me. And in that sweat lodge, we'd done for 5 years prior, and it was that much of the entire experience. It was just kind of the sizzle on the steak, if you will. It was a way to experientially go into a difficult situation physically and to say, all right, I've done all this spiritual, mental, emotional work for 5 days. And now I'm going to metaphorically go into a difficult situation and I'm going to feel like I don't want to do this. And I'm going to push through that. And then that will, we're able, what we call in psychology, to practice transference. That means we can go back home and go, hey, when I face confrontation at home and difficulty, I did that. I can do this. I can transfer that same experience here. Well, at the end of the day, 3 people died in that lodge, and it broke my heart. It literally broke my heart. Now, the reality is, Linda, is that anyone who is a thinking individual had to know it was an accident. And yet the state of Arizona came after me for manslaughter, and they charged me with a crime. It blew my mind. It just literally blew my mind. And so they, long story short, I went through a 4-month trial, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And the way our legal system is structured, the prosecution gets to go first. And so if we know anything about psychology, they already had the whole jury convinced after 4 months, literally 4 months of prosecution about all these things. Well, he lives in Beverly Hills and he's got all this money and he does this and he does that. And that I was a horrible person. And so then after all that has been laid groundwork, now the defense gets to go. And so at the end of the day, the jury couldn't find one shred of evidence for manslaughter. Manslaughter is intentional harm.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I can't believe there's one business owner, one entrepreneur, any individual viewing this today who would say, I believe I could intentionally harm my clients and stay in business. It has no logic to it. And so they couldn't find one shred of evidence because there wasn't a shred of evidence. It was an accident, a horrible accident. And I don't want to minimize it because, again, it broke my heart, and yet it was an accident. And so the legal system is structured such that they bumped it up to manslaughter because there's a lesser inclusive called negligence. Well, they decided we got to give him something. So I got negligence, and I take responsibility for negligence, which says, hey, some things could have been done better. I wish they would have been. Some things were overlooked. In retrospect, God, I wish they hadn't been. And yet, did I commit a crime? No, it was an accident. But at the end of the day, I went to prison for 2 years, and I lost everything that I had built in life except what was in here.
Mhm.
And that's the most valuable. The only thing that has true and lasting value are those things which are eternal. That's just a fact. If it can be lost or taken away, it has no real value. It has use value, but it doesn't have intrinsic value, if you follow. And so that brought me back to heart and to the center and to realization of who I really am. And there's the hope, every significant breakthrough is preceded by a breakdown. And I don't like that any more than you do, but
Yeah.
that's a fact because you have to break down the old. And that's what we're experiencing in our world today. You break down the old so that there's a space for a new emergent. And until I broke down the old, there was no place for something new to come in, like this lovely young lady who I didn't know. We're celebrating our fourth wedding anniversary this month. We've been together 11 years. Yeah, thank you. And I wouldn't trade all the houses in Beverly Hills
Yeah.
for that or all the millions for that. And so anyway, there's a lot more to the story, but prison was a horrible and amazing experience. I'm grateful for it in retrospect. Don't want to do it again. God, please listen to me. I don't want to do it again, but I'm grateful for all the things I learned and experienced.
Of course. And I would like to get into the healing thing, but before we do, I want to talk just a little bit about how the person who, when we have an accident, that the person who did the harm also hurts. Because I think sometimes people don't remember that. And if I can just share a brief story, a few years ago, my son was in a motorcycle accident and he was hit by a car and it was not good. According to physics, according to the nature of the accident, he should be dead. But fortunately for him and for me and for his sweet wife and his very little children, he is still alive. And I happened to be very near the scene when it took place. So I arrived at the scene of the accident in time to see my son's broken body lying in the middle of an intersection, surrounded by flashing lights, ambulance, police cars, emergency personnel. And that is an image I will never forget. And my daughter-in-law, my son's wife, was with me. And after a moment or two, I noticed she wasn't standing near me anymore. And so I went to find her because I was concerned about how she was doing. And she had gone to the driver of the car to ask if he was okay and to let him know that we didn't blame him and that we understood that it was an accident. And she taught me a lesson that day because, quite frankly, I wasn't even thinking about the other driver. I didn't even notice the car. All I could see was my son. And so I appreciate her teaching me and reminding me that even though the driver of that car physically was completely uninjured, the mental and emotional anguish of recognizing that he was responsible for this, fortunately not death in this case, but this severe injury. I just want to remind our listeners that it hurts on both ends. And sometimes when we are hurt, we look for someone to blame, but that doesn't actually solve the pain. That's not the answer. The answer is healing. The answer is healing for each and every person. And I believe that love and forgiveness are very important for healing for everyone. So I'm so sorry for you. I am so sorry for those people who lost their loved ones. I mean, there's nothing good that came out of that situation, but I'm grateful that you were able to heal, and I hope that healing took place for the families as well. But let's go now back to your story, and let's talk about how you met Bear and how this came to be, and how you can be okay even after having such a roller coaster, that from such a high to such a low, to be able to pull out again. So
Well, when Beersheba met me, I was homeless. I was $20 million in debt.
Mm-hmm.
I was alone and I was in horrible physical condition. I came out of prison in horrible physical condition. I lost 40 pounds I didn't need to lose. I had horrendous periodontal disease, and I was $20 million in debt, which is sizable to say the least. And so, here again, if I may just emphasize, the only thing that has true and lasting value is that which is eternal, that which can never be lost or taken, because just just a few years earlier, I was worth quote worth north of 20 million. That was my net worth, supposedly. And in a blink of an eye, I was now $20 million in debt. So that's how quickly and transitory things in the physical world are. And so I wasn't a real attractive prospect, quite frankly. And when Versiva met me, I was 54 years of age and I was sleeping on my mom's couch. And and people often ask her, we had a relationship expert female tell us once, I tell women, don't don't go after that broken guy,
Yeah.
and so, you know, you can ask her why she went after this broken guy, because I was broken. I was in mental anguish, and I was mad at life, and mad at the system, and mad at
Mm-hmm.
God, and just really not in a good place. And yet, my speculation, and I'd love to have her tell you, is that um, part of what allowed her to see beyond that was her previous experience, was the things she'd been through, the
Mm-hmm.
hell she'd been through as well. And she saw beyond the hell that I was in to something greater. Is that fair?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm just gonna add a comment on your son. I'm glad he's okay.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that he made it through that, and it sounds like you have an amazing daughter-in-law.
Oh, she's the best.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. Yeah. I will remember that story. I'm going to remember that story. Um yeah, and that, fits in pretty well to this too is I know you're gonna get me choked up. uh um, I know what he had to go through. Um to be able to get through and keep going. I saw that part. And people don't see that. So
Right.
She's been there the whole time.
my hat's off to your daughter-in-law.
Yeah. 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 Um,
People, it was a very tragic accident. I mean, three people lost their lives. That's serious, and it's very tragic on the families. Especially he knew those participants very well,
intimately.
intimately. Sometimes more, actually more than their own family knew, because they come there to share things in an intimate space where their own families don't even know about it, and then they die on his watch, and he has to live with that for the rest of his days, and nobody can say anything or do anything to ever change that. He has to take that with himself to his grave.
It's
And
a heavy cross to bear.
it
It
is.
is.
And I see him. I know what he feels to carry that. So thank you for sharing that story.
And thanks for your understanding.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the hope, if we may, because um, we grow the most, we learn the most, we become the most in the crucible of challenge.
Mm,
That's a fact. We don't grow the most, learn the most, become the most when we're sipping the fine wine and smelling the roses. God, I wish that were true sometimes, but it's just not true.
yeah.
God, I really don't like the fact that we grow the most in the crucible of challenge and maybe you don't either, but not liking it is not going to change it.
Yeah.
It's the truth. That's what really tells us what we're made of. That's what helps us to grow and become bigger, better, more understanding, more compassionate people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the hope. I mean, Beersheba has told me numerous times, there's a documentary on my life. I don't know if you've seen it, called Enlighten Us, that CNN put together, and it was on Netflix. I don't know where it is now. It's definitely on YouTube, but nonetheless, um, the whole breakdown of the old James Arthur Ray was very painful. And yet, Beersheba, there's some old clips of me way back when I was at the pinnacle, and Beersheba has watched that and said, if you were still that guy, I wouldn't, be with you, because you're a completely different person now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I wasn't a bad person at all, but I'm a better person now. And that's what challenges bring out in us if we're willing to embrace it and accept it. I think you come out of something difficult, and you could have done this with your son.
Mm-hmm.
You come out of a difficult situation either bitter and angry, or you come out more awake and grateful. And I choose the latter, because bitter and angry takes you nowhere except circling the drain. And so we get to make a choice. Does life deal all of us a tough hand? Yes, there's not one of us, and someone may say, well, I can't compare my situation to Beersheba, or I can't compare my situation to James, or I can't compare my situation to Linda and her son. You can't compare, because it's all relative. Everything that someone deals
Mm-hmm.
with is the most difficult thing that they have to deal with, and it feels the same.
Yeah.
And so there's not one of us that isn't dealt a tough hand. The question is, what are you going to do with it? And that's what I talk about in my book, The Business of Redemption, is only when you take absolute responsibility for who you are and where you are and all the things that have come to you in life, do you have the opportunity to change them and improve them. As long as you're placing blame, as long as you're not taking responsibility, you don't have the opportunity or the ability to change them or improve them.
Yeah.
And I like how you mentioned how we all have our different experiences. Everybody has something. And we've come from 3 very different stories that we've shared. But all of us have felt that heartache, and all of us have felt the angst, and all of us have had a need for resilience and for redemption, for that chance to be able to heal and to be able to repair. Now, do you want to share any of your story of your healing, and what did Bear do that worked, that changed and made it so that you could walk day to day and be okay rather than stay sunk, circling around the drain?
Yeah.
Well, we work on each other.
Yeah.
We both do a lot of work with what they call in the mystery soul retrieval, and that sounds real esoteric. But what happens, and Beersheba alluded to this, is that psychology tells us that the most important years in our life is 14 years of age and younger. And that's where things happen to us that we don't have a lot of resources to deal with.
Yeah.
You heard Beersheba's story when she was really young. Don't have a lot of resources to deal with. So you do whatever you can do to cope. You power through, whatever it takes. And yet it's unresolved. It gets stuffed and you think it's gone. It's not gone. Because psychology tells us 95% of what we do every single day is driven unconsciously.
Yeah.
It's not driven by our conscious mind. It's driven by your unconscious mind. And so the work that we do is helping make the unconscious conscious, because only when you, and this is what Beersheba did with me, this is what I do with her, and we've done an immeasurable amount of work over the last 11 years, and that's a long time, but
Yeah.
it takes that. And so only when you can make the unconscious conscious are you able to observe the block, the hindrance, the barrier, and then you can heal it and integrate it and set yourself free. As long as it's unconscious, you can't deal with it. And so the first thing she did before she really had embraced her intuitive gifts was she believed in me. I'm not sure why, because I wasn't evidencing a lot of believable behaviors at the time. Maybe she can speak to that, but she believed in me. And that I wasn't quite sure I even believed in myself anymore. I had been hammered so hard by the media, literally, and by all platforms of media, mainstream media as well as social media. And I'll tell you, unfortunately, this is a fact. The harshest critics and the hardest hitters were the so-called spiritual community. It's unfortunate, but people who claim to be so loving and claim to be so accepting and claim to want to help others were the harshest critics. And it was really unfortunate. And so, again, I bought in because going back to where I was in Beverly Hills and on the top of Oprah and $20 million, I realize now that I spent a major portion of my life chasing the opinions of people I didn't even know. I wanted to impress and be accepted by people that I didn't even know. Now, that's ridiculous. Logically, that's ridiculous. And yet, how many of us do that? And I wanted the approval of people that I didn't even know or didn't even care about me. And so that all, in a nanosecond, I can't tell you how many people, oh, I love you, you've changed my life, all these things. And then just like that, they flipped and they started, oh, he's a money monger and he's Satan and he's all these different things. The same people. And so they jumped on the bandwagon. And that was one of the great lessons, because here's a young lady who did know me, and she knew me with all of my flaws and all of my brokenness. And she cared. She cared. So, there aren't a lot of, I was telling Bersaba this morning over coffee, there's not a lot of opinions that I really care about anymore from other people. I care about her opinion of me because she knows me and she cares about me. I care about my brother's opinion because he knows me and he loves me. But everyone else, they don't even know me. They don't even love me. They just speculate about me, and they know about that much, whatever they see on social media. And that's not true. And we all know that. And so that was the first step. And then she believed in me, and she believed so much in me that she came to work for me without pay. She reached out to me and said, hey, I want to work with you and help you. And I said, well, and she's a graphic designer and she's got schooling in animation and a lot of talents. And she said, I want to come to work with you. I can help you with your social media. And I said, okay. And that sounds great. And I'm $20 million in debt. I'm not going to be able to pay you. And she said, that's all right. She goes, I have a full-time job. Now get this, Linda. She went to work for me she'd get up at 4 a.m. and she'd work till 6:30 every single day. And then she'd get ready for work and go to work for a whole 8-hour tour and get home about 6:30, grab a quick bite to eat, and then work till midnight for me every single day with no pay for 3 years.
Yeah, it was a long 3 years.
Which tells you a lot about her character. For 3 years, because she believed in me and believed in the things that I was talking about. And so I have nothing but admiration and respect and gratitude for her for obvious reasons. And I will just say this, the first 3 years we weren't a couple. She worked for me and then we became a couple. and now we're married, and now I work for her. And
See?
so if you're married, you kind of know,
Oh,
you know how that works out. Okay. That's karma. I work for her, and I'm totally okay with that. I'm totally good with
see, it
it.
all paid off.
That is wonderful. That's beautiful. So the thing that saved you really was having someone believe in you,
Yes.
Yeah.
to love you, to accept you. And the love was platonic at first, but it was evidenced through work.
hmm
And that is the answer. There's a scripture that says charity never faileth. And to
Mm.
me, that means the answer is always, what do I do when I don't know what to do? And the
Mm,
answer is love them.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's never the wrong answer. And believing in someone, I think that's beautiful. Well, I'm so glad that you found each other and that you are experiencing success in more of your physical. It looks like you're doing better now than you were.
Much
Yeah.
better.
Relationship, you're doing better, and hopefully so physically and mentally and emotionally, spiritually, financially, hopefully everything is kind of panning out okay.
Yes.
It really is. We're incredibly blessed and very, very grateful.
Grateful.
God
Very
and
grateful.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Oh, we do have a gift for your audience, a free gift for your audience with James's New York Times bestseller, Harmonic Wealth. And we want to gift them the movie because I know nowadays readers, there's far and few in between. So we say we'll give them the movie. So you just go to harmonicwealthglobal.com /movie, and you could watch the Harmonic Wealth movie for free on us.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to include that link in the show notes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both for visiting with me today. This has been moving. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks
Take
for
care.
having us. Keep doing great work.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by Nelson Mandela. He said, "The greatest glory lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." Today, I invite our listeners to rise when we fall. See you next time on Linda's Corner.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Linda's Corner, please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. I also invite you to check out my nonprofit, Hope for Healing, at the website hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free ebooks and other free resources to help increase happiness, build confidence and self-esteem, strengthen relationships, manage stress, and calm feelings of depression and anxiety. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, or Amazon bestseller, You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.